I'm going to go ahead and get going here. We're going to start this at noon and then hopefully run for probably a little less than an hour. It looks like we might have some time for some questions that will come through. And so I do appreciate you guys showing up and trying to learn something. So this will be about Visualize. It looks like we're doing some tips and tricks, and I am Ryan Cole. I'm one of the applications engineers here at SOLIDWORKS. So I like to play around with Visualize, and everybody knows that, so I get to do some of these things here. And what I want to present to you guys today is going to be visualizing your visualizations with Visualize, and had a nice little ring to it. So, but really, let's go ahead and get into this. Like I said, I want to go ahead and cover a couple things with you guys. And so basically what we'll be doing is we'll get into some render modes, some core tips and tricks, and then maybe some secrets for you guys as well too. So let's go ahead and take a look at the render modes here. And render modes and their uses. This is something that I think I've had quite a few calls on this, and I'm not sure. It's not really explained what's going on, and I think more people can maybe try to understand what's going on here. So a lot of times the question I get is, why is it rendering? I just opened my file, it started rendering on the screen, I need to do some work on it. And every time you move it, it starts to re-render. And really what it has to do with these buttons right here. You'll see that at the top of your screen, and we'll jump into Visualize here so we can kind of take a little look at it. But really there's three different modes here. We have a preview mode. This is the least intensive on your computer. Really it's very similar to the fancy rendering that you can do inside of SOLIDWORKS. It's a very quick pass. It's got a reflection map in it. Shadows aren't being calculated. Real-time reflections aren't being calculated either. And it's got its uses and stuff like that. The other mode that we have here is what we call our fast mode, and our fast mode actually is it's a little bit better on the rendering. The reflections are now being calculated, so you're getting a little bit better read on what the appearance will look like on your model. But it also has two different modes. It has a mode for speed and a mode for quality as well too. And we'll go ahead and see that when we jump into the program as well too. And then I'll show you the differences between all these as we go through. The last one we have is the accurate. It's not quite fast, but it is right. These are the hard calculations that are being done on your image. And it's refraction is being done, reflection is being done, emissives are being done. These are lights that you can add in and stuff like that. These are going to be actually doing the hard calculations, even light bounces as well too. So really this is the slowest one, but it does give you the most accurate image. And really, if you have a rendering coming out, if you're doing it for marketing, or you have a final image coming out, you should be using the accurate mode in most cases there. So let's go ahead and take a look at that and how it really applies to inside the rendering itself. Now you can see my render modes up here. Right now I'm on the middle one, which is the fast render. I'm going to go ahead and go to the preview render here. And so when I click on it, we're going to see the screen click a little bit. And as we rotate this around, you'll see that while I do have reflections in here, you'll see that the glass can be seen through. The problem with that, though, is the glass does have some tint to it. So while we can see through it, the actual calculations for how the light reacts with the tint is not being shown at this time. The thing is if you were here in my office, you would hear my computer running like crazy. But as soon as I put on the preview mode here, a lot of that strain comes off of my computer. And like I said, these are pretty fast calculations, stuff like that. Primarily what I do, this is a personal preference here, this is great for doing quick setups. It's great for working with larger models. It's also great for applying appearances, because your appearances are coming through pretty quickly here. If I were to grab, say the door here and make it mercury instead of the red, you can see that you get a pretty quick reply coming back to it, and there's no wait for a render to come through to clarify how it's going to look. So definitely when I'm working with a larger model set and I'm applying a lot of different appearances, this is really the mode that I'm working in. It allows me to work very quickly. But at a certain time, you want to start seeing how things are working out, and you want to see really the true color. One thing you have to be careful of, I catch it with some of the woods inside of the appearance tab that we have, that they appear very light until you actually render them, and then they get darker. I'm not sure why it does that. It's not a bug with the software software. It's just the way that the appearance reacts. And so basically, if you want to see how things really look, but you still don't want a lot of time being spent on it, we can go into the fast mode here. Now, you can see it's fairly fast. You'll see that some of the shadows are being calculated down here. But one thing to notice is that if I were to zoom in down here, we'd see that the shadow's not being done for the whole car, really. Well, it kind of is. You can kind of see some shadows through here. Also, you'll start seeing more of that render mode taking into effect here, where it's a little, a little pixely as I move around. Once I let the mouse go, it starts doing that iterative rendering process at that time. So here you can see, here's a good clear example. You can see the spokes, like lights going through the spokes on the wheels here. So once again, this gives you a little bit better appearance here. You can see that the glass is acting more glass. We do have some shadows, but it's still not quite right. But once again, you're not putting a lot of strain, and you're able to do things very quickly. This works out really good for lights if you're changing the background or whatever. And once again, if you're working with a large data set. Now, like I said before, there is two modes for the fast here. You've got the fast, was just for speed, and then you have the speed, or you actually have it for quality as well too. If I go ahead and click on this, you'll see the full shadow comes in, and once again, this is doing a little bit more work. So this is actually calculating more of the shadow more accurately, and it does give me a better idea of how this is going to end up looking here. Once again, it's a little bit quicker. Actually, it's a lot bit quicker than the final render, but it's a little slower than the preview, but you are getting a more accurate take on what's going on, and this allows you to make some good decisions. Once again, this is where I start getting into near the end of a project, where I'm kind of making sure everything is being put together here. We did have a question here from Frank. I am using SOLIDWORKS Visualize 2019, and most of these options are going to be available. In fact, everything I'm talking about today can be done on either version, older version of the software. So definitely, hopefully that helps you out with that answer. Now, the last render mode that we have here is we do have the accurate. Now, when I click on the accurate, we're going to see it takes a little bit longer. Now, what's happening here is your shadows are being calculated 100% correctly at this point. It's a little bit darker under the car where there's less light getting into, as opposed to having a nice even shade going around. You'll see that there's a little feathering on the shadows as well too for items that are farther away versus something that's closer over here where we're looking at the front end of the vehicle itself. So, it does, take a little bit more time to do this, and really as I'm getting into the final renderings, I'm usually doing it in the final render here and just trying to get a little bit of a placement. It does take a little bit longer to get a cleaner image, but it is helping it, and it's making sure that I'm going to be right. Ideally what I do is, by the time I get to the final render stage here, really what I want to do is when I do the final output, if I were to output the rendering, I should be able to come down to the accurate, set it for however many passes I feel comfortable with, and then hit go. And then that final image is going to be exactly what I expect it to. This is one of the main differences that I usually find between Visualize and the PhotoView 360, where sometimes with PhotoView 360 you had to set a bunch of stuff up, wait some time for your render just to go, nope, that's not what I'm looking for, and then you blindly had to go back in. I do like the fact that we have kind of a gradient render here coming through. So the fact that we have the preview to the fast to get a better idea what it's going to look like, to even being able to work inside of an accurate one where this is what your final image is going to look like, and it makes things a little bit easier for you and less doing things over and over again. So let's get into some of the stuff that you came here. That's one of the tips and tricks that I had. A lot of times people don't understand what that rendering button is, but we'll definitely, hopefully that'll help you understand why those buttons are working, what do you use them for, when do you use them. So basically, let's look at some tricks and tips here. And I kind of broke these down into a couple of different things here. I broke them down into appearances, cameras, and the last one was the environment as well too. Sorry, I had to look at my own notes there. So let's look at appearances. Appearances are probably the one thing that you guys are going to play a lot inside of the software, and probably the one thing that is going to be either the frustrating thing or you kind of just go along with it. First, what I want to tell you guys, the library inside of Visualize is actually larger than you think it is, and we'll go ahead and show that to you. And then also, I did want to show you kind of some cool methodologies of how to create your own, and sometimes creating your own is a little difficult because just for various reasons. So let's jump back into the software here. I'm going to come in and take a look at our Appearance tab. Now, we do have our Appearance tab up here. When you're working with appearances, what I do like about this is that the appearances for the project stay with the project. I don't have to have access to a library. If I were to pass this off to a coworker, to a customer, to anybody else, when they open the file up, all your appearances would be with this file. So if you do make your own custom appearances, it works out pretty good. Now, the downside of making your own custom appearances, though, is that, well, how do you get it from one project to another project? Well, there's a couple ways we can do this. One of the ways that we can do this, and actually the easiest way to do it, is say this plasma red mica. I've gone through, I've played around with the appearances a little bit, and now I want to go ahead and save that into a library. Well, if I go ahead and pick it, there's an icon up at the top here, and this is your export button. I never liked that button because I wasn't sure what it was exporting it to, but honestly what it is it's just a simple save as. So if I click on the export and hit save as appearance, it'll pop up and it'll ask me where do I want to save this to. Now I'm putting this in my standard one, but I do have my RLC customs. These are all of my own custom materials or appearances that I popped up with. Had a bathroom that I did, so those were very specific to a project, but I did like them. So really, that's how you can save out any appearance that you have created previously, and we'll kind of roundhouse on that a little bit later. Now, a lot of times you may start out with an appearance that's already available for you. Now, if I come over to the library, this is going to be up in the upper right-hand corner, and I go ahead and click on it, we're going to get the appearance library. And if you don't see appearances here, this is actually a library for everything. So regardless whether it's an appearance or a camera or environment or anything like that, you can actually save out a lot of items into this. So we're going to go ahead and keep into the appearance tab here the way it is now. Excuse me. And this is how yours probably looks. In fact, there's probably a little less in yours if you haven't done any of the stuff that I'm going to show you here. But if you go into the, say, let's go into the leather, we'll see that there's a whole bunch of leathers in here. And once again, if you have leather and you look into it, you may find that you have a lot less. Now, ideally what's happening here is right at the very top here, you'll see that I'm in the local area. This is my local library. This is the one that's loaded on your particular computer. What I want to show you is the fact that you can go to the cloud library. The cloud library is actually pretty nice. I'm going to go ahead and click on it, and you won't see too many differences, but basically what is going on here is that if I were to come into the plastics, we're going to see a bunch of materials. Now, once again, if you look into your plastics, you're going to probably find you have a little less than mine. But if I come in here, and we'll see that there's these little green check boxes right here, these means that these have been loaded locally to my computer. Let me go ahead and try to see if I can find one that I don't have. I think there was some under the SOLIDWORKS appearances. No, apparently that wasn't it. Let's go into plastic. There we go. So here, this is on the cloud, and if I take a look at it, you'll see there's no green checkbox, but when I go over and hover over any of these icons, it is going to give me a little bit of a download thing, and it will give you a size. It'll tell you if it's been downloaded or not, and in order to download it, to get it into your local library, all you need to do is just click on it. You'll get a little time symbol. Once it's done, you get the little checkbox, and you can go through and download any number of these. This does not take any certain licensing or anything like that. It's actually done through the program itself. So definitely, if you're out there and you're looking for materials or appearances that you don't have, definitely give the cloud a try. Go in there, take a look at it. Still may not have the correct appearance that you might be looking for, but maybe you might find something that's close, and then you can modify it from there. And if you modify it, you can always use that export button to save it back out into your local drive. So let's take a look at this. I've got it downloaded, and if I go back into my library and look under the SOLIDWORKS and do plastic and high gloss, no, let's see. composite. Those will be the 5 that I did not have previously. So now they are able to be utilized. I can go ahead and drag those wherever I want. Apparently composite on the vehicle does not look as cool as it sounds. So we're going to go ahead and not put any of those on. But anyway, being able to get to that cloud, being able to download the stuff, and it's not just for appearances either. If you get into cameras, there's quite a few cameras that would be available for you as well too. Maybe even some environments that you don't have. You can see here that there's some low-key ones, there's some mountainside. So there is a handful that are installed with your computer, but make sure that you can always go back in there and check out that cloud, see what they have. I do it on a fairly regular basis, and they've been updating it every once in a while, so definitely keep an eye out for that. All right, the other thing I wanted to talk about is a good method of creating your own material, your own appearance. I keep on calling it material, but it is an appearance. One thing that I want to show you guys is that, you know, a lot of times someone might start out with a sphere or a cylinder or something, or maybe a sphere and a cylinder, and maybe a cube as well too, and maybe throw some fillets on. Well, basically these are, you know, usually this allows you to apply some appearances to something, maybe develop some of your own appearances for future use. But one of the things that the software actually offers is they do have a what would be called an appearance setup file, and it's a bunch of straight and curvy stuff and stuff inside of stuff and all that good stuff. And honestly, what it comes down to is if I go to File here, I'm going to go to File. And, well, actually, let's do this. I'm going to go ahead and close out this file. I'm not going to save any changes that we've done to it. And this is actually easier to get here. You get to the blank screen where you can see your projects. Here's my recent projects that I've been working on. They do have some sample projects that are in here. And that's really what I want to kind of show here is it's this one right here. It's called the Appearance Model. This does get loaded with your stock version of the software. And I would heavily suggest not deleting it. And the reason why is I'm going to go ahead and open it here. What they do is they give you a very neutral background. You can see that it's kind of got some grids on the bottom here. In fact, if I take a look at it, the camera's been locked as well too, so that way it doesn't move around. That way you get the same look every single time. Now that doesn't mean that you can't get into your camera and move it around on your own. You might want to do that anyway, but when you want to snap back to that final camera, it's going to get it there for you at that point. So what I like about this is really it comes up to here. So up in my upper right hand corner there's something called Models, and if I go ahead and pop that down, we'll see that there's the test material and there's a couple of other ones in here. But if I expand out this one, we have subsurface bar, we have neutral sphere, we have the bubbles, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so I can select those. And what's happening here is, so let's take a look at the first one, which is the subsurface bubbles. These are actually little spheres embedded into the model, and that means if I were to make this clear, I would be able to see those. So what this does is basically it sets up a whole bunch of different things that could appear. Maybe you wanted to model some, maybe some soda pop or something like that, a can of Coke or maybe a Sprite. You could start setting up transparent materials on this item, and then you could use the subsurface bottles and actually make those oxygen if you wanted to, but you could start setting up the different items here. The other one that we have here is what's called a subsurface bar, and let's see if that's actually appearing here. It does not appear to be. Let's see. That is an item. Let's go ahead and hide this here real quick. Is right here. So this is what they call a density check. They actually put text on there so you can see it. The density check is really nice because if you've got materials, say like a wax, which is we might get into what's called subsurface scattering, that would allow you to go ahead and show if something was buried in there, like maybe the wick of a candle and how that might actually portray through the light. So you can do some fairly advanced stuff, but this would be the model that I would actually test it on. So let me go ahead and bring everything back here so we got it showing, and then I'll bring up this model and I'll go through. Now they do have some materials that are in here, and usually what I'll start doing is I'll say I need a new appearance, and from there I will go through and let's make sure we're working on the medium, the fast one here. Now if you're going to create your own materials, the big thing to know here is there's lots of different appearance types. You've got your plastics, you've got your paints, Plastics can be transparent, where paints usually are just like paint. They're not really transparent. You got things in here like thin film. This is a great way to, say, model a bubble, or maybe it's a thin coating onto a file. This or some geometry. You have things like backscattering, which is a great way to demonstrate materials, especially like a silk or something like that, where you get a backscattering of light as it hits it from different angles and stuff like that. You get into metallic paints or metals. Metal is going to be pretty straightforward. If I come in here, you can apply a color. Say I want to make it a white metal. And then if I grab that and drag it on here, we start to get an idea of what that material is going to look like. Plus, we can go through, change the roughness. We can either make it really shiny, a perfect mirror, or we give it a little bit of roughness where it's kind of, we can see it. But this is when I'm playing with the materials, I'm not usually going to be in the preview mode. Preview mode is going to give me some stuff to work with. If anything, what I might do is go into fast mode and make sure I'm on quality. But if I really want to double check and triple check everything, I might go into the accurate and make sure that that's going to look nice. And I'll let quite a few passes come through on the bottom down here. Now, staying in the fast mode here, one thing that I want to show you here is I'm going to come in and I'm going to do an emitter. So let's go ahead and create a new appearance. And this one's going to be an emissive. And when I grab it, let's go ahead and we'll make it kind of white with a little bit of tint of red in there. And then we do have the brightness as well too. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to insert it onto the ball in here. Now we'll see that that does make it very bright white. But the downside is because of my render mode here in the fast, it actually is not showing me the actual emission of the light. The only way that we're going to be able to do that, if you are working with some of these materials, the only way that you can see the actual way the material is going to react is going to be to go to that accurate setting right here. Now, once I do the accurate setting, you will see the shadows start appearing down here, and we can see that it is emitting the light at that time. So this is one of those things where, once again, I'll usually work in the fast mode until I need to go, okay, how does this actually look? All right, looks like it's okay, but that's way brighter than I thought it was going to be. But that'll allow me to come in and then simply take it to something that's a little bit nicer. That way you have a soft glow as opposed to this burning bright light in there. And once again, you still get to play with it. If I take a look at the new appearance here and I go into what's called subsurface scattering, this is going to be materials like wax and even human skin. I know as a kid I would nerdily put flashlights up to my hand and you could kind of see through that. Unknowingly at the time I was actually dealing with what's called subsurface scattering, how the light goes into the material and is scattered around. So we can do the same thing here, and right now that looks like it's way too much. So we're going to go ahead and darken that down a little bit, and then we can see how we start to absorb some of that light. In fact, we're going to go ahead and scatter that, and now you can see that it's more kind of a milky type material, and allows us to play around with that as well too. So, you know, I've been pretty hard pressed. The only material that I honestly have run across so far that I was unable to do in here is kind of the holographic type material, but I'm still playing with that. So that's to come soon, and I'll probably write a blog on that when I figure it out. I'll be very excited to pass that information along. But if anything, really, it shouldn't be too hard. It all starts with a right-click new appearance, or even just modifying a current appearance that may be on the screen. Also, we're not going to go too deep into it here, but you can add in textures, and different types of materials or appearances do have different textures that can be applied to it. So if I were to create a new appearance here, and let's go ahead and make this the plastic one. If I go into the texture, I can do a color. Color is going to be really good if you're trying to, say, have a painted pattern on there. It's going to be one way to do it. Other ways to do it would be decals. Other ones are specularity. This is how shiny it is in certain spots. This works really good when you're trying to do materials that may have some wear patterns on it, where there still might be some shiny parts of the model, but there might be some paint scuffed away, and you want to kind of show that's a little bit duller there. Other things might be where part of it may be wet and part of it may be dry. There's lots of great ways, but really this is how shiny it is. And then when we get to alpha, this is really, is it there or is it not there? If you're poking holes into it without really poking holes into it, the alpha will allow you to do that, and it's all done on gray shades. And then finally, we do have our bumps in here as well too. So if I were to go into a bump and say, use that as my bump, we'll give it a sec here to pop up. I could use this on this outer material, and we can start to see some of the bumps appearing there. Really, it comes down to making it smaller or bigger. Yeah, bigger. Sometimes I don't move the numbers in the right way, but this will give it that kind of bump appearance, and we do have the ability to either do it as a normal, or we can actually do a displacement where we will physically adjust the model there if you see it there. So does have lots of capabilities when you get in here. Now you can see the highlight, the model is still the same. This is just the visual representation of the deformation. So once again, you can do lots of great things, lots of cool things once you get in here. It all starts with a simple right click, new appearance, and then start picking your options from there. Lots of resources online. What I do like about this program is they do use a lot of common terminology and common methodology that's out there from other 3D application softwares. And so you can actually use a lot of the same information from those guys, from those things that you can in here as well too, and it allows you to kind of learn a little bit more if you find that some of the resources for Visualize is a little lacking in certain places, although there are lots of good information, but really there's 20 years plus of other 3D applications out there that have a lot of good information. So Google search it, works out pretty good. Even other places to find some of these textures at. If you need a brick house or you need a brick texture, don't make millions of bricks like I've done before. Actually put a texture on it. It's nice, quick, and easy. So appearances, that library does have that cloud. You can get to that cloud very easily, very quick to download them. Some of them are a little bit bigger than others, but I haven't seen too many more that are, more than a couple meg in certain size, and those were the biggest ones. Also, don't forget that you do have the ability to get to this appearance model. We'll go ahead and close this out here real quick, and just to kind of reiterate it, don't save changes. It's going to be found under the sample files, and you should find it right there for the appearance model. All right, environments. Environments are the next thing that really has a lot to do with your project that you're rendering out. Obviously, how the part looks is going to be important, but the next step after that is really what's the environment that it's in. And here you can see that I've got the same model listed 16 times with the same material, the same appearance, but you can see that the background is drastically changing the mood and the look of the image. So really make sure you understand that it's not always going to be a gray background. It's not going to always be a white background. Although if you do need those, that will, we can definitely do that. And I'll show you how you can get a white background, but still have this mixture of environment out there. So let's go ahead and jump back in. In fact, what I'll do is I'll go to my car here. We're going to give this a second. It's going to take just a moment to load up, but let's take a look at the appearance. Now, when I was showing this to you guys earlier, I noticed that the image was, well, the image seemed to be a little dark to me, which doesn't make a lot of sense because it's outside in a driveway in a sun. In fact, if I rotate this around, we can see that it's a nice sunny day. Don't worry about the car. There's no clouds in the sky. The sun's shining bright, but honestly, it looks like a pair of dark sunglasses I'm looking through at it. So this is what I'm talking about with the mood and stuff like that. Now, if I were to continue to use this, let me go to my appearance tab here, my environment tab, and we can see that I have a sunny driveway there. I'm going to go ahead and click on it to make sure that all my options underneath come in. And one way that you can adjust the brightness of everything is really located under the advanced tab. And now always remember that you do have these separate tabs here. Now, the brightness can be found in both tabs, so that's kind of a good story there. And then what we have here is we've got the ability to adjust the brightness. So you'll see that as I raise that up, we can see that everything's getting a little bit brighter. That looks more like a sunshiny day to me. We'll see that once I let go of it, those rendering passes will start in. My shadows are showing what's going on here. Everything seems to be a little bit nicer. The other one that we have here is sometimes you have a car in the perfect mode, but the environment isn't your best friend sometimes. Sometimes you got something in the background that you're not happy with. In fact, I would prefer to see the car with something a little bit nicer behind it, but now my orientation of my vehicle is messed up. So, you know, it's like, okay, so let's go ahead and do this. I like this particular orientation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, and we have the rotation in your environment. Now, your environment is really just a big sphere here, and as I slowly rotate this around, we can see that the car is staying in its correct orientation, but the scene around it is moving around. Now, the one thing that you have to be careful of is I can't move it as far as I'd like, so we're going to go ahead and rotate all the way to 360 degrees, and this will allow me to bring it through, and then that'll give me a little bit nicer. In fact, what I'll do is I'll use my pan keys here, and we'll kind of make it look, well, we can make it look like a radio control car. So just by zooming out. So this is that next thing when you're playing with your cameras, which we haven't gotten into. But this will give me something a little bit nicer, see more of the colors coming out. But once again, I am on my final render here. So, you know, the passes are a little bit slower. But the more I sit, the more it looks better, and I'm ready to go from there. So definitely your backgrounds. Now, the other things that we have here is, like I said, it does change the mood. Let's try the Tokyo Atrium. This is one of the default ones that comes with the program. You know, once again, kind of gets dark here, but this one actually makes sense due to the fact that, well, it's inside. So the lighting might be a little bit closer. Maybe we might raise it up just a little bit to give it a little bit more brightness. And then we'll kind of go from there. And there, you know. That looks a little bit nicer. Maybe we'll make it a little bit more, you know, strategically placed so it looks better. But once again, I'm going to go back to that hard render here to make sure that my lighting, that my shadows, that my refractions, that my reflections, all that's going to work out nicely for me. And if I'm happy with it, we kind of go from there, and this gives me a nice image. But, you know, definitely a drastic difference between this background and this background. Even the Route 66 one, if I go to the Route 66, once again, you've got that, you know, that change there that's going on. And, you know, once again, this is outside, so let's crank that up to 4. Let's make it a bright desert day. And you're going to change the way the mood of that drawing. It goes from something where it seems like it's kind of dark and shady out to now that something looks a little bit better, and maybe even get that to move on down the road here a little bit. As it's traveling away. So once again, that all thing about the mood thing. Now, really, most of your quote-unquote mood is really coming from the reflections. And maybe you like the way that this looks, or maybe you're just trying to set it up in the studio. You know, I'm trying to look for this particular look. I like the way the lighting hits the curves, but I really can't stand the whole background color here. In fact, you know, if I rotate this around, we'll see that these are kind of lights in the background reacting against my car. Well, I'm going to get this settled in exactly where I want it. I'm going to get those lights reflecting exactly how I want to get them in there. And now I want to get rid of my background. Now, one way to get rid of it would be to take the brightness to 0. And now we've only got headlights showing, so that's probably not the best way to do this. So let's go ahead and take that back to 1. In fact, let's brighten this up a little bit. So we'll go ahead and change that to, say, 2. A little too bright. Let's go into, say, 1.5. Okay, I'm feeling good about this one. This one looks pretty good. Now, the downside of this is, if you're going to take this image and you're going to incorporate it into your website or any kind of marketing, sometimes we need just a plain background. This is not going to help us out very well if we were to, you know, take this image, render it out, and give it to, say, a marketing purpose person. They're going to come back and they're going to go, well, I really hate you, because this is going to be a lot of work trying to extract this information from the background. One thing you can do to make it a little bit simpler would be to come over here. When you're on your appearance over on the right-hand side, we can come down and we can see that there's 2 different background types. There's the environment, and that's the actual image being used in the background. That's where your lighting's coming from. That's where your reflections are coming from. You can also turn it to color, which is going to go ahead and just keep it a single color from back to bottom. There will be shadows on the ground, but those can be turned off. If you go to the appearance tab here, you can come down. Oh, so let's see if, oh, there it is, floor shadows. Thought for sure it wasn't going to be here. We're going to hit the floor shadows. Now there's no floor shadows. It's simply its own, its own item here. In fact, if I come back to the color here, you'll see that there is a bar. You've got your nice little color tab here. If we wanted to green screen it, if we really wanted to, we could even green screen this just to give it a little bit better appearance there. That way they could click anything in the gray and it's going to come off immediately, and you're good to go there. So once again, you can play with this. If you need just a plain white background, easy enough to get in there. Make it plain white, make it completely black, do whatever you want to here. That's going to be able to, get you that final product and what you're looking for. So when you get into the appearances, lots of ways. Control the brightness, control the rotation. In fact, here, if I wanted to, I could actually adjust that lighting by rotating that environment to make it so that light shines up exactly how I want it to shine up. Maybe it's, it's just stupid. I can sit here and play with it all day. You guys did not come here for that. So, but remember, you do have your appearances, your environment. So what I want to show you, though, is while SOLIDWORKS does have a nice handful of them, I do want to kind of point any of my users to a website called Chiara Haven. And this is where you can get not just HDRIs, but you can get some very high-end HDRs. Now, HDRs are high dynamic range images. If you look at a JPEG or a normal image that we're used to seeing, JPEGs, bitmaps, TIFF images, each pixel carries the value of the color. And depending on if it's 255 by 255 by 255, whatever the color is, it only captures the color of that particular pixel. HDRIs not only capture the color, but they also capture light intensity. Now, if I were to, if I were to take a picture outside, we would have to worry about the exposure rates. Well, the nice thing about an HDR is that it captures the exposure of the image along with the color. So it means that if I looked at the sun directly, things in the shadows would get a lot darker. If I were to look in the shadows directly, things outside of the shadows would be a lot brighter. So this image is a little bit higher end, and it captures a lot more information. But also, what we are able to do is we're able to use that for our images here. In fact, if I take a look at the car here, let's go ahead and switch it back to the sunshine driveway or the sunny driveway. We'll see that the shadow is coming in, and we can see the reflection of the sun right here. And that's because that sun, let's see if we can see it here, there it is, that's the image of the sun. In fact, if I were to crank down the brightness here, we'd see that that is the actual sun right there. And as we bring it up higher, we can see it flares that out, but it is what's casting the shadow down here. There are no extra lights in my project or anything. It is coming from that bright spot of the HDR. Now, the reason I point people to this website, number one, they are free right now. It used to be when I first found this website, it was you probably were going to spend a couple $100s on each one of these images. So the fact that they're free now is outstanding. What you do is you come to the HDRs, and when you come through, they give you a couple different categories, all outdoors, skies, indoors, studios, nature, any of that stuff is coming through. They do give you a nice little image here of what the actual HDR looks like, but then underneath they'll give you a couple of rendering spheres that are showing you what does the reflection look like, what does the light look like, what does the bounce look like, what does something clear look like. And these are great to use. If you go ahead and click on one of them, you'll see that you're given the big image. There's nice ways that you can click on this and actually look around it. This is the sphere that it would generate, and this is just me poking around there. So that would be my background, my environment that's popping in. Now, when you come down a little bit farther, you'll see that you have a couple of different download types. You have 1K, 2K, 4K, 8K, and 16K. What this is this is the bracketing of the image. It means how many levels of light were actually recorded. And you can see with the 16K, they're pretty heavy files. And don't forget that when you use one of these files and you bring it into a project, your project loads that into itself. So if you started out with a project that maybe was 15 megabytes in size and you brought in this environment, it's now going to be 357 meg bigger just because it is storing this inside of itself. So be a little wary with that. I found that out only because I had 4 or 5 of these in there, and I was trying to figure out why my project file had gone to over a gig in size, and it was because of the backgrounds. But they give you far superior shadows, lighting, background, all that good stuff. In fact, a good example would be, let me see here. I'm on my other screen. So this would be one of the HDRs that I used. You've got the Lego assembly here. You've got a tabletop. Everything is fake except for a little bit of the background. This is coming from the HDR directly. And then all of my lighting is coming just from that image. There's no extra lighting that was put in this or anything like that. So you can see the back end where it's outside. It's getting a lot of the bright light and bright reflections. And then here's some more internal electric lights that are a little bit softer, a little bit more orange. And once again, all I did was I pretended I set this onto a tabletop where they had it in the image, and that's where the lights came from. So it made it really easy. The other one that you can do here is, let's see, this one. You know, this is one that I recently completed. So it's a nice little car park with this nice skylight above here, but it gave me this really nice image down here as far as being able to pull the lighting in the way that I wanted it to. And once again, there's no extraneous lighting. It's all coming from the background. But all these backgrounds that I've played with have come from this Chiara Haven. Definitely go into it. And if you're going to be using them a lot, I've done it as well too, but I would suggest definitely give them some money for doing this. They've got great quality images at a free cost. So if you want to, go ahead and take a look out there. You'll see that there are quite a few other places that have these HDRs. They are nice quality. But you're going to find that you can pay anywhere from maybe $50 to maybe a couple $100 for a pack, and I've seen them as expensive as $3,000 just for a single image that has that HDR information in it. So definitely give them a go, and if you like them, go ahead and support them. They'll like it. All right, last thing I want to talk to you guys about is the camera here. And the camera is, well, first and foremost, you can't have too many. The more cameras you have, the better off. I know I've gotten into times where, especially coming from SOLIDWORKS, I had the camera. It was my viewport that I looked out of. This program has really made me appreciate the extra cameras that you can put into a system here. So you can't have too many, and there's actually some pretty cool options with the cameras as well too. In fact, let's go ahead and open this up. I'm going to open up. Let's close this down. I'll show you one of the uses that I had for the camera here. Yep, this is the one I wanted. So, I have this one camera that I'm kind of looking at. It's my default camera. I have it listed right here, and I can see that under that camera tab, and that camera tab can be found up here. Now, you'll see that I've got a couple of other cameras in here, and really what these are doing for me is this is going ahead and moving that camera around. This gives me a front quarter panel type view. One of the things that I did turn on this camera is the depth of field. You can see that it's in focus near, but the farther away we get, it's a little bit more blurry. We have that capability just like you have in a real camera. I do have another 3/4 view here. We can see that it comes through. I've even turned on some of the bloom on this. The bloom is going to make it so if something is really bright, it kind of blooms. It makes it's a little more indistinct of what's going on there. And then finally we have our rear detail. Once again, I'm focused in on the lamp here. But you can see that the rest is kind of blurred out. Now, if you have use of the camera and you know how to use it, this is less work that has to be done post-process. And that's one of the things that I like about the camera. So I've gotten into using a lot of camera setups. In fact, one of the things that I will say is that once you get a camera set up exactly how you like it, make sure you come over here and lock it. And that means that you can't accidentally rotate. I'm trying to rotate. I'm trying to zoom in, zoom out. The button's not going to do it, and nothing's going to work with it anymore. I can still adjust it, but we can definitely see that it has a lock on it as well too. If I do need to make an adjustment, I can go ahead, unlock it, move it up a little bit, maybe change the perspective there a little bit, make it a little bit less rakish. Well, now my depth of field has gone out. So really I'm going through this general tab on the particular camera. Now, if you want to use this depth of field, the easiest way to do it is to hit the pick button right here, and then I pick the area that I want to be in focus. So I'm going to pick that light, and you'll see it instantly comes into focus. And then the items underneath here, you have the ability to adjust the aperture and the f-stop. Once again, since this is mimicking a real camera, this is going to allow you to adjust how much is being blurred out versus how much is staying a little clear here. So, here I might pull that back and say, well, it was too blurry before. It's going to go through its render. Now, be aware, blurry areas, especially up here, it's a little difficult to see it. Those are going to take a little bit more calculation time, only because it's trying to get rid of all the pixels there. So be a little careful with that. It can extend your rendering time. Something that looks great at 1500 or 2000 or even 3000 passes, like we can see down here, may not look so great if you have some blur. So make sure you check that out and try to do as best you can. So cameras are pretty cool. I do like them. They are a little weird, I guess, to me, but we can control the aspect ratio. And then we get into the transformations. And you have a couple of different things here. You have a dolly. Let's go ahead and go into a regular one. The dolly is going to be kind of like your zoom in, zoom out. Sorry, that was zooming in way out. You do have a little bit of numeric control in here. So if you want to be at a particular angle from the zero of the floor, and then you also have that twist capability as well too. And then you have your XYZ positions down here. And remember, everything is in meters down here. So be careful if you're typing in a number. If your part came in as a 1 millimeter, that's going to be 0.001. So be very careful with that. Other things, you can show the camera in a viewport. So if we turned it on, that'll actually make the camera visible. And probably the best thing to do, especially when you're messing around with your cameras, would be to go to View and then under, oh, look at that. Found something else that's only available in our Pro version. But in the Pro version, we could actually split these cameras and have two different screens with two different cameras. So definitely if you get to the Pro, you get a lot more capability. One of my coworkers and I talked a lot about what's in Pro and what's not in Pro, and it looks like I just found out something else, so I'm going to give him a heads up on that. But anyway, we're not going to show it in the viewport. We can't show you exactly what I want to show you here, so I do apologize for that. Definitely, we might have a Pro tips and tricks in the future. It would be worth your while to come see that a little bit more. Last thing we have here is the advanced. I like this in the fact that under the advanced tab we have a rule of thirds overlay, and you can do thirds or fourths, but let's go ahead and do thirds. But what this does is that kind of gives you that the ability, it gives you the lines on the screen showing you where the thirds are. So if you're really looking at how your image is coming together, how you're framing your image, where it's supposed to be, this is kind of a nice little grid line, and it can be changed to different colors as well too. And then once again, you can turn it off, take a look at it, or if you do the output up here and render the image out, those will not be in the image once you get done rendering it out. All right, so never going to have too many. Don't be afraid to create a camera. Don't be afraid to lock it down. Usually I create that one nice view. You can copy and paste cameras as well too. So you can come in here, Control C or right click edit copy, and then you can hit Control V. That will copy that camera. You can see it's the same here and here. The other one you can do is if you want the same camera, don't copy and paste it. Hit the Control D key. So I'm going to pick this camera, hit Control D, and we can see that we have another one that was automatically generated here. So once again, kind of nice, especially if you want to just tweak that view just a little bit. I can come in here and now I can tweak that a little bit, and it didn't ruin the first one. In fact, all I did was I just captured another version. You're not going to make your file size that much bigger by doing this. This is very small pieces of information here. So not copying the whole model, just a secondary camera. So don't be afraid to use those. Definitely a good way to get them to work better for you. All right, something you shouldn't be able to do. This is the top secret stuff. Hopefully you guys all got the email that was signing affidavits that you're not going to tell anybody else about this. But let's get into this. A question that I get frequently, especially with people that are used to rendering systems, how do I add lights? I can do it in SOLIDWORKS, but I can't do it in Visualize. Visualize does come in two flavors. The ability to add lights into a project, so here's the short answer. It can be done in Visual Pro. but along with Visual Pro, we'll get lights. You'll get configuration capabilities, which is ways you can change your background, your cameras, your lights, the appearances, everything. We can also do animations, and we can also do VR output as well too with the Pro. So lights are definitely one of the things that comes along with it. The better answer, though, is watch this. Let's go ahead and take a look here, and we kind of already seen it. In fact, let me go ahead and close this down. And we'll say no. And let me go ahead and open up that appearance tab. I kind of showed my hand a little bit earlier. The fact is that we can use emissives in here. So if I come in and create a new material, a new appearance, and we turn this into an emissive, well, there you go. So that works out pretty good. We'll go ahead and make that bright white, a little bit of red, maybe a little bit of blue. There we go. And we'll go ahead and apply this here. Now, once again, if you're in that quick render or fast render mode, you're not going to see the light act as like light. It's bright, but it's not casting light. That's going to come in, and we have to do the accurate portion here. Accurate will actually cast it out and all that good stuff. Now, the downside is that's great if I want a light here, but what if I want a light above the model? I don't want a light right on the model itself. Well, here's the little secret. So the secret is you can put lights into your model. You just have to create them manually, okay? When you're in the Pro version, you should be able to right-click here, and there will be a new light down here. In fact, there's a couple options that I'll talk to you guys about. But in a case like this, let's go do a different camera so I can move it around. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. And it's not that I want this to be a light, but I need to add a light to my file here. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to go to Project, I'm going to go to Models, and then I'm going to go to what's called the new model. Now when you get in here, these are a bunch of geometric primitives that you can bring in. You can do circles, boxes, planes, a wall, a plane, a sphere, anything. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in a sphere. Now that is my sphere at this time. It's a little large, but what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pick on it. Now when we pick on it, we'll take us to the Model tab, and usually the first thing I'll do is I will go ahead and grab this and move it in the Z direction. No, not Z today. No, not X. We're going to go ahead and move it in the Y direction. So we'll move it up, and we're going to go ahead and shrink that down as well too. So I'm going to use the scale button right here to shrink it down to something that's a little bit more manageable. And then if anything, what I can really do here is I might be able to come in and actually do the move capability. So let's go ahead and move it. There we go. So we'll grab that. And then I'll zoom in a little bit more. Now, the last thing I need to do is I need to make it a light. I now have a sphere in here. I'm going to go ahead and go to my appearances. I'm going to grab the light that was there. In fact, what I'm going to do is just duplicate this light. And the reason being is I'm going to brighten this up a little bit, and I'm going to dim this down to something that's a little bit more better for what I'm looking for here. Now, we got the light up there. The downside is it's not really showing me any kind of effect of the light, and that's because, once again, I do have to go to that accurate modeling to get that light to appear here. Now we're going to go ahead and crank that up to, say, 50, and as I turn that light to be brighter and brighter, you'll see that it has more of an effect here on my image. The nice thing is, if I wanted to, I could come in, I could duplicate that sphere, and then I could move that around as well too, and this would give me the ability to have multiple lights in here depending on where I want to go. So if we take a look down there, now you can see a little bit of that shadows coming in. I can also hide them as well too. So if I wanted to hide it, you can see I'm now casting from the back here. So while the standard version of the software does not have the the lights in there. You can still put lights in if you really, really need to. So definitely know that you have that capability. Although if you do have the Pro capability, one of the nice things that they have in there is when you right click and you enter the light, you can tell it exactly where you want to see the light in your model. What that does is that will back trace that light to exactly where it has to be positioned. So the downside of what I did here is if I need to manipulate the light, I have to do it manually. There's no easy toggles and switches and slides to move around. So just keep it in mind. In a pinch, you got the capability to do it. If I come back into my cameras and look at the final camera, we can see that that light is coming in from that backside source there. The only other thing I wanted to show you here is something that not a lot of people might know about. This is in 2019. In 2018 Visualize Service Pack 5, or no, Service Pack 3, this was actually put in. There is something called the denoiser that's in here. The best way to show you this is, let's get this to be, well, let's take a look at it. Let's get on the free camera. There we go. All right, so I'm going to get into the free camera here, and when I'm in the accurate mode, we can see it's kind of difficult to see because my computer's running pretty nicely today, but when we make a small movement, we can see that, well, we can see it takes a little bit longer and longer to, take care of this little blurry region here as it kind of, coagulates on the screen. One of the things that you can do to get this to work a little bit nicer is to use the denoiser. Now, the denoiser basically will do some different calculations. If you've used Photoshop, it seems to be very reminiscent of the smart blur, but what it does is it has an algorithm that tries to smooth things out a little bit nicer. The downside to it is, depending on the size of your drawing, it can make it look like a watercolor when you're in the early pass region that's at the bottom there. Ultimately, what I found out is that it's anywhere from 5 to 10 times faster to use this, although there is some slight inaccuracies in your final rendering. Basically, what I was able to do is something that was supposed to take me 8,000 passes. I was able to get it done in 80 or 800 passes, which is a significant time difference there. The 8,000 passes that I was going to have it at probably would have taken upwards of 14 to 20 hours on my previous computer. This shrunk that down to about 6.5 hours. And then even on the newer computer today, I still leave it on. And especially when you're going to do your output, you'll see that you do have the denoiser in there. I have to say that I thought it was some French word. I thought it was denoiser or something. And then someone said, no, it's the denoiser. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So anyway, don't forget the denoiser is up there. Definitely when you're looking at harder or larger items, it's definitely going to be nice to have that capability there. So once again, lights are in the Pro version, but you can create your own when you need to, and you may get really good at it, and you might not need to go to the Pro version at all because you're so awesome at it. So if anything, the benefits are it is a lot easier to put those lights in, easier to control them, easier to change them. If I wanted to change that light from a sphere light to maybe a tube light or maybe even just a nice plain light, I would have to go through and create the plane, add the material, move it to where I need to. Inside of the Visualize Pro, it is a lot quicker, a lot easier to do that. Really just clicks up a button. So render modes, preview is great for quickly putting out appearances. Don't be afraid to flip between the various modes. You saw me kind of click back and forth in them. Under tips and tricks, appearances are easy to get. Environments are the mood of your rendering, and the cameras are just like real cameras. So if you can think of something that you do with a real camera, you could probably emulate it inside of Visualize. Last we have here, Pro is not necessarily needed for lights. But the lights in Pro do have some really nice time-saving functions. And then don't forget that denoiser. That function is available in all versions of Visualize. Other than that, I'm pretty much done. So I do appreciate your time, and thank you very much for coming to hear me talk about Visualize.